Good day and welcome back to another DB Legends video. In this video we are going to be taking a look at the fight against Super Saiyan Goku and Super Saiyan Vegeta. So obviously with all of these fierce fights comes these challenge battles, and generally speaking players have found them quite hard. So what I've decided to do essentially is I've decided it would be best to really just try and show you guys how to beat the fight. So obviously first thing that comes to mind is equipment. You can pick up this equipment from the Metal Cooler event itself. It's obviously super duper helpful. Then there is this equipment. This is the Broly equipment. There's two places to get it, but it's great. It gives you a lot of defense, which is super duper helpful. So I would highly suggest that you obviously grab this if you can. Then, in terms of the third equipment, this one you can get from Hyperdimensional Co-op. So you can actually pick this up pretty easily, and it's actually quite a nice one to pick up. It's really quite solid. It'll help you quite a lot. It does a lot of good work, and yeah, it gives you health restoration and health, which is obviously very good. Now in terms of your team bonus, make sure that your leader applies to Cooler, because when you don't select the leader, their skill does not apply to the unit you're using. So when it's fights where you can only use one unit, not having a leader that applies to Cooler is basically a death sentence, because you're not going to be getting that additional team bonus, which means that ideally you're not going to have the best kind of period in terms of using the unit. So I think overall there's definitely an incentive to using this kind of build. In terms of tactics, there's not too much that you kind of need to know offhand. So in terms of important things, you'll see there that I do a little delay whenever I vanishing step. So the AI will pretty much instantly vanish step if you vanish step. But if you wait for them to finish their animation, generally speaking, they actually kind of don't vanish step then. The second tip that I can give is break up their combos. So don't break them up straight away, but switch in units and break up the combos as best you can. So if you can switch in a unit to break up the combo, do it around halfway. Do it after one or two attacks. Not obviously where you kind of, how can I say, not to the point where you obviously take too much damage, where you're left in like the 30% zone. But I think, where, how can I say, you're in that about 40% to 50% range. It's generally a pretty good method in terms of taking on the fight. And then just reset. I mean, you saw there, I had a pretty rough time. Just reset it. Don't try and fight through it. Just reset it until you get a pretty good start. Generally speaking, that's kind of the best way to go. So a big important thing about the coolers is the health restoration. They get a lot of health slowly back over time, so it is just very, very important to try and get that health restoration going relatively solid. So if you give them enough time, you should regain quite a decent chunk of health back, whereas if you don't really give it a huge amount of time, then obviously you'll struggle a little bit. Not saying that you're going to have a terrible time, but you will struggle a little bit, just because of the fact that obviously you haven't managed to regain all your health. Rising rushes, use them pretty much straight away. Everything else, use them pretty much straight away. That's usually the absolute best kind of way to go with it. At least for me, I think that's the best way to go. So obviously, with Cooler, with him as a unit, he does the most damage, but the other two can do some decent damage. They're not going to do nothing, but they will take a lot. They probably take damage at a rate of 1.5 to Cooler. So, yeah, overall, I think you obviously want to keep Cooler out as long as possible, but don't be afraid to switch up, deal some damage, and then switch back in. Also, generally speaking, Cooler, you can increase his stars by doing a hyperdimensional co-op. So that's obviously a great way to kind of improve him overall as a unit. Like, you're going to be able to get a lot more production out of him. Now, obviously, in terms of his kit, you know, there's obviously some pretty, like, how can I say, there's obviously some pretty important things in terms of his kit that you want to understand. So the, you know, lock-on buster, his ultimate move, the way that it locks enemies in, and obviously gives him a substitution count increase. The fact that his special skill will increase the damage that they take. In terms of his, you know, actual effects, he shortens substitution counts every time that he switches in, which is obviously super duper good. He obviously decreases the enemy's card art speed. He will restore his own key, reduce their key. So obviously that's very important for understanding Cooler, and also just for getting pretty good production out of him. And when you do understand that, generally speaking, you have a much better time. Again, you can see we switch in the green Cooler, and we basically make sure that we hit him with as much damage as possible. We hit Goku with all our damage, and then we switch out. So that's the premise. We keep our vanishing gauge up. You can see I waited again, didn't let him, you know, instant vanish gauge as soon as I vanish gauged, and basically just set myself up, got my damage in, switched in the other Cooler. Just keep switching. It's the number one strategy here. Again, wait till the animation's done, and then basically able to get in some free damage. Also, as much as it's frowned upon in PvP combat, hitting just straight attack after straight attack is generally a pretty good strategy here, just because of the notion that you are essentially, you know, going to get quite a lot of damage in. You can see here, switching out Cooler, I knew that that Cooler would die if he took that attack, so just keep switching them out. Switching out, letting them constantly renew their health, letting them constantly get their vanishing gauge back, just playing the numbers game. I know I have more units than they do, and if I can take one out, I can keep switching between the three as long as I'm smart enough, and I can keep getting the restoration, I can keep getting the health back, and yeah, generally speaking, I can have a pretty good kind of, yeah, run, generally speaking. Obviously there's ways that obviously there's ways they can still kind of break the combo. That is just part of it. But yeah, generally speaking, I find this to be the best. It's a strategy that's worked, and it gets the results. It's always a challenge, you know, in these kind of game modes, like especially when the AI now, you can't float step anymore, but you just have to play the numbers game, and yeah, you should generally be okay. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but generally speaking, you should be fine, at least for me. So yeah, for the most part, I think it was a fairly easy attempt. I think it takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you have the habit of switching in the Coolers, then generally speaking, you don't have any more issues, you know, going further. You generally are okay, and you can take things on pretty well from there. As you can see, we handle everything more than fine. We're just refreshing that vanishing gauge, letting ourselves kind of sink in the damage, and finishing Goku off easy. Keep switching, use your switches, switch vanishing gauge, do it until you can wear yourself in, hit a combo, and then switch out. That's honestly the best way to go about it. So yeah, that is how to beat Cooler, how to complete all the challenges. Very, very good. So yeah, obviously just thought I'd do a video. I know it helps out. So yeah, I'm hoping that this will help you guys out, and that yeah, basically you know, can use this to get your own victory. At least that's what I hope. But yeah, thanks guys for watching, and bye.